Today's scripture reading will be taken from Luke chapter 14, verses 7 through 11. Again, that's Luke chapter 14, 7 through 11. The parable of the wedding feast. Now he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, "When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you is invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this person,' and then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted."
Good morning. I want to make sure everybody's sitting in the right place. Have to scan the audience. There was a lectureship not too long ago, at least the story is told, and it was a tradition among this group that the senior ministers would always sit down front, and you sat in the auditorium according to your, they didn't use this term, but it was essentially your rank, and if you were the newest minister, you sat in the back, and I guess you were kind of lucky to be in the room, maybe, I don't know. But so anyway, they had this series ongoing, and a young minister got there, and it was his first time being there, and he sat down front because he wanted to hear the lesson. And as it turns out, the gentleman who was to give that lesson that day was a person who cared about him very much. But anyway, so the young man sat down, and an older minister came down and said, "Look, you're supposed to sit in the back. You're not supposed to be, down front with everybody, with all the rest of us senior ministers." Not knowing the subject of the day, the gentleman gets up to speak, and it was on this particular subject. And he noticed what happened to that young minister, and knowing that young minister the way he did, he knew the only reason he was there was to just listen as intently. Not necessarily the goal of everybody who was sitting down front. They sat down front because they thought it was an important place of honor. So the minister introduced this young person, this young man he hadn't intended to, and he said, "If you would you please come down, sit down close to the front row and encourage me while I speak?" So he did. He brought him down front and asked one of those senior ministers to, remove himself further back. And people were a little bit aghast. How could he do something like that? It's that we all know how it's supposed to be. We find situations in life many times when we have an opportunity to do something that is wonderful and great and helpful. And sometimes in life, I think people just plumb forget. As we say, we forget our manners. We forget that it's a good thing to let someone else have a place of priority or preeminence. And in this particular scene, this particular scenario, we find, again, Jesus in a Pharisee's house, somewhat being tested, being watched over how he's going to react over a certain circumstance. And yet, once again, this seems to backfire on those people who were there. Pharisees were well known to be people of prominence. They were expected to be prominent. They wanted to be treated prominently. Thus, they had these, as I've mentioned before, bold phylacteries, these big boxes on their wrists and on their foreheads. And people assumed that anyone with a box that big on their head must be great at prayers. Well, Jesus had a different opinion. Because if the reason you had that large phylactery was because you wanted people to think, and by the way, the term virtue signaling that we use today to indicate something that is insincere, but they want someone else to think that it's true, that's what that large phylactery was. It was a virtue signal that was a lie. They wanted people to believe something about them that was not true. Just because you could be a Pharisee did not necessarily mean that you were a person of great religious or righteous prominence. But let's take a look at this parable. And it starts off, the preface to it is Luke 14, verses 1 to 6. It happened when he went into the house of one of the leaders of the Pharisees on the Sabbath to eat bread, they were watching him closely. If you read your New Testament, there's only one reason these Pharisees watched Jesus. It was not because they were intently interested in his message. They were looking for failure. They were looking for points to accuse, points to attack. They knew he was rising up. They already know he's baptizing more people than John did. They already got that going on. So they're looking for a reason to do something. And anyway, and there in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Now, there's a reason that people sat where they sat. Most of the time when people would have, and it's still the case today, if you have a dinner party or something like that at your house, we even occasionally have occasions like it down here where people will have place settings. They'll have specific places they're supposed to sit. And Cassie's shaking her head. There's a lot of thought that goes into who sits where sometimes, you know. If it's a wedding, you don't want the wrong people sitting by each other. So you try to get the right people to sit by each other. And sometimes, depending on the families, that's hard to find. But we try to sit by who we're supposed to sit by and that kind of thing. And so everybody enjoys the day. But Jesus sat down in this particular place, and he was set in that place on purpose. And they placed him across from this person that had a disability that they knew was going to be a temptation for him to heal. And what's the problem with him healing? It's on the Sabbath. They're looking to confront the Son of God about healing on the Sabbath. That's how desperate people get. I'm going to catch the Lord healing somebody on the Sabbath. Well, my goodness, I hope so. I hope people are healed every day of the week. But you know, the Pharisees have already invented all these technical issues, these things that go along with the law, and because they're Pharisees and they're entitled to do that, and they can tell the Lord God Almighty when he can function and when he should sit down and be quiet. If you don't find that blasphemous, I don't know how much more clearly I can put it. But that's what they were looking for. He goes on, and Jesus answered and spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" If they did something smart, they did it just now. It says they kept silent. And he took hold of him and healed him and sent him away. There's no need for you to stay for dinner because this sideshow is about to end. I'm going to heal you and send you on your way. This is not your fault. You've done nothing wrong. But I'm about to teach these other people in this room a lesson. And so I had an elder son tell me one time, it wasn't here, but it was at another congregation I was working at, and he said, "I love my dad, but when I was a kid, I'd rather he whoop me than give me one of them lectures. You know, I'd rather just whoop me, get me over with, but I had to sit and listen." He said that was the worst thing in the world. But anyway, I said, "Well, I work for your dad. I haven't gotten there yet." But they kept silent, took hold of him, healed him, sent him away. And he said to them, "Which one of you have a son or an ox fall into a well and will not immediately put him out on a Sabbath day?" And they couldn't make any reply. And all Jesus is saying is, which one of you that has an animal that gets into a problem, falls into a ditch, has an issue, falls down, and you won't do everything you can to get him back up? That day, at that moment, in that time. And you come to me looking to assault me. He doesn't say this, but this is the inference. Looking to assault me over healing a child of God, someone made in the image of God. That's what you seek to make me a bad guy over. Well, I would imagine the Pharisees may have been silent vocally, but they were probably thinking a lot. He began speaking a parable to the invited guests. He noticed how they had been picking out the places of honor at the table. You see, while they were watching Jesus, Jesus was doing what? He was watching them. It's one thing to be a hunter. It's another thing to become the hunted. And in this case, Jesus, I'm going to tell you, Jesus was tough. Anybody that has a picture of the Lord that thinks he was weak, that thinks he was somehow, he just buckled under everything and they got to bully him, push him around. Jesus didn't do anything in this world that Jesus didn't want to do. And he did everything for the right reason. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of folks that attacked him. All the folks that attacked him did so wrongfully. Now, there's times when we bear the consequences of actions in our life, and we brought them on. That's hard for some people to believe. But believe it or not, sometimes we get into trouble because we put ourselves in trouble. Jesus never put himself in trouble the minute he came to this earth. When he was a baby being born, from that moment, it seemed they were seeking ways to get rid of him. Somebody somewhere was always against the Lord in that regard. And he wasn't just being paranoid, it was really true. But he watched them and saw they were picking out places of honor at the table. Now, the table set up in these days, is traditionally thought, was usually a U shape. And it had two tables on one side and one at the bottom. And it was so servants could come and serve from the middle. And everybody sat around the outside rim. And when they say that this person is sitting across from Jesus, it could indicate that he was sitting beside him or he was facing him across the other two tables. But either way, it doesn't really matter. But they were coming in, and the prominent places at each one of these sections is in the middle of the table. That's the prominent section. When you see the portraits, the paintings of the Lord's Supper, and you see Jesus where? He's in the middle, right? Well, that's traditionally where the person of prominence would be. And so these guys, if you can imagine, they're all sitting in there, and we got to get to the middle of the table. We got to get in the middle, and who put that kid in the middle of the table? That's my seat, and all this kind of stuff is going on. And people are processing that thing, and they're saying to themselves, I want to be the person of honor. Now, I don't know if you got more food. I don't know what the deal was with being in the middle of the table. I've always learned in those situations be nice to the cooks, but that's a whole different deal. But if you're going to sit in the middle of the table and you want to be the person of honor, because that's what you want to be, and that's why you're there. I want you to think for just a minute, if I told you this afternoon that Jesus was going to be downstairs in the basement, and, where would, we'd all say, well, Jesus got to sit at the place of honor, right? I don't know about y'all, but I don't think we have a place of honor, do we? All the seats are the same, Will? Is that true? Yeah. So the place, whether or not a person is in honor, really has more to do with the people being present than it has to do with where that person might select to sit, right? I've known some people who have prominent places. They're the president of so-and-so or the CEO of this or that, and when they walk in the room, everybody kind of snaps to attention, solely because this person has the authority to fire you. That's fear. That's not honor. That's not even love. That's just, and you got the little sycophants running. You know what a sycophant is? That's a yes man. Oh, yes. Yeah, let me get that door for you, sir. Don't know. I'll get that. No, if you need something, you just let me know. I'll take care of you. Invite the Lord God Almighty into your home to trap him. That's blasphemy on a level that is unexplainable. So he goes on, he tells this parable. When you're invited by someone to a wedding feast, let me get that up on the board here. Do not take the place of honor, for someone more distinguished than you may have been invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, give your place to this man, and then in disgrace you proceed to occupy the last place. The last place is the place nobody else wants to be. But when you're invited, go and recline at the last place so that when the one who has invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. And then you'll have honor in the sight of all who are at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Do you want to know what one of the greatest weaknesses is among the church today? It's no mystery. And I can tell you very plainly, I know it from fact, from statistics, from experience. It's pride. If you get a prideful leader, you have a disaster on your hands. You have a disaster. Because leaders in the Lord's church are supposed to care about the people they lead. Prideful people care about who? Themselves. They care about defending themselves. They don't care about anybody else. We got preachers who are like that. We got deacons who are like that. We got elders who are like that. And I'm talking about the church at large today. We got folks who do. We got members who are like that. We got members who are so prideful that they believe they can tell the elders what to do, but refuse to take a leadership position because they don't want to take the responsibility of being one. You see, it's one thing to rule in hindsight. It's one thing to say, well, if I'd been there, I would have, and it should have been, and all this kind of, I've seen that. I asked a fellow one time who was, and I was young, I wasn't even in ministry at the time, I was still a little plumber, pipe fitter, working out in the world, just trying to make my living during the day, And I was an active member of the Lord's church, and I love the Lord, and I love people, and he kept having these complaints, and I said, well, why aren't you an elder? Oh, no, I can't be an elder. You can't. But you think you can tell them what to do all the time. See, I was too young to know what not to say. And he looked at me the way you might imagine. Like, who are you to tell me that, young man? I suddenly remembered what Paul told Timothy. Don't let him look down on you because you're young. Are you right or are you wrong? That's the question. Did you tell the truth or did you tell a lie? That parable, to me, is pretty amazing. It's one of the greatest descriptions to me of why the Bible was not written by men. Because the people to be exalted biblically are those that are humble. It's not the ones who achieve all the awards, who get all the recognition, who get all the... It's not to say that God doesn't have great love for those people who are successful. But it is to say that he has not forgotten the humble. He's not, nobody in the Lord's body is forgotten. So none of us has to worry about trying to get ahead of anybody else because we think somebody's ahead of us. Jesus Christ died for you. I don't know what bigger accolade, how much more value can be given to a human being than the fact that Jesus Christ died for us. You can have an award, you can have rank, you can have recognition, you can have 10,000 letters after your name. I don't care. But if Jesus Christ died for you, let me tell you something. On Judgment Day, that's the only thing that's going to matter. So looking for the prominent place, that's foolishness. That's a waste of time. That is Satan trying to wear you out doing nothing. I don't want to be a doormat. I don't want to be last. Well, the Lord said if you're last, you're going to be first. Think about that. What about his logic? What about his reason? You see, I'm sure these Pharisees didn't see this. They didn't see this coming. They had a whole other plan in sight. He's going to heal that fellow of dropsy, and we're going to get him. Jesus said, I'm going to teach you a lesson right now. It was not Jesus who got, as it were. Sometimes when we read parables, if we're not careful, we lose sight of what the lesson is supposed to be. Some people might look at the parable and say, see, Jesus has given us a structure for how to handle wedding feasts. No, he's just using that as an example. What he's trying to tell us is where we need to put ourselves humbly in line and in sight of other people. So let's take a look at some things real quickly in application. First of all, we need to learn the danger of pride. Pride is a very dangerous thing, and we need to realize that. So when we think about the effects of it, when we're told, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves, Philippians 2 and verse 3. What do you think about your brothers and your sisters, and what do you think about people in the world? I'm going to tell you what, I've known a lot of people ask me over the years, what's the best way to help somebody open up to the gospel of Jesus Christ? Why don't you treat them decently? Be a good person in their presence and in their absence, but be a good person. Treat them fairly. Let them know that you don't even have to bring up the Lord, but let them know that they have value. Let them know that you care about what happens in their life. And again, I'm not talking about the virtue signaling that people have mastered today. Oh, I'm going to pray for you. I care about you. I love you. I'm talking about doing something real, something substantial, that when you get on your knees and you pray for your kids and your grandkids, you're praying for somebody else too. You're thinking about their circumstance. You're keeping them in mind. And when you get the opportunity to walk in this world and live in this world, that you make them a part of the priorities that you have in life. And then don't be surprised if one day they ask you, why are you doing all this? Why are you doing this? Nobody else in the world does this. There's your open door. Jesus Christ is the reason I do this. I just thought I was a good person. You're being nice to me. Well, you're a good person, and I hope I'm being nice to you, but I do it for Jesus. That's why I do it. I mean, let's not get things out. When the children of Israel were winning all those battles, when they were leaving Egypt, they all thought they were great fighters. They were farmers and artisans and craftsmen. No soldiers. God won those battles. And they got way out of whack when they started to think, we're a pretty good army. Well, that handed them their defeats. So if you want to lose in life, forget who you are and forget who it is that wins our battles. Take the pride out of it. I've heard people say, well, I work hard, and I'm sure you do work hard. There's a lot of people that work hard that don't make a lot of money. They work very hard. Some of them work a lot harder than the folks that are making a lot of money. That doesn't make you good or bad. The fact that we're rewarded in life and we feel, well, I got the Christian of the Year award. Well, okay. I don't know who makes that selection. God makes that selection. If it comes from heaven, it's yours. But if it comes from anybody else, I'd wonder. Because we'd have to know an awful lot to be able to give that, wouldn't we? The second thing we need to learn is the importance of humility. In 2 Timothy 2, verses 24 to 25, the Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, be kind to all, able to teach, patient when wronged, and with gentleness correcting those who are in opposition, if perhaps God may grant them repentance, leading to the knowledge of the truth. There is a value in humility. And so I would ask you this. Y'all know the joke about the humble button, right? A guy was thought to be the most humble individual in the congregation, and so the church got together one day and gave him a humble button, and he wore it to church, and they took it away from him. Don't wear your humility that way. Don't be a false individual. When I was in St. Louis, one of the things I learned, I got a chance to work with some groups, one of which was a motorcycle club. And I always felt this way. Clubs did a lot of things that I didn't agree with. But if they asked me to be their chaplain, my rule was this: I'll be the chaplain, but you can't tell me how to be a chaplain. And they were like, oh, I don't know. Well, they knew me. They wanted me to do that job. What that means is, if you want somebody to pray with you, I will pray with you. If you want somebody to teach you something biblically, I will give you every ounce of my resource and ability. But if you want me to condone something that's wrong, don't come to me, because I'm not going to do it. You'd be amazed at how many people said, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. Because one of the things they believe in that culture is that you be who you are. You be real about who you are, is what they believe. If you want to get in trouble with bikers, lie to them. I just show y'all, next time you meet a biker gang, you just keep that in mind. Be honest, you know. I think sometimes in life, humility, we try to feign humility, and we expect to gain from that action something that we think God's going to, well, you know, if I'm going to be humble, and I'm going to, well, you know what? Humility is an attitude of the heart as much as it is an outward action. I can look at it this way. Let's just say there's someone in a wheelchair and they're trying to get in our building. And I walk up to the door and I think to myself, here's a person who needs help. I'll hold the door open. That's fine. That's humility. You hold the door open, they come in. That's okay. Now, if I go up and I say, you know what? That's so-and-so's son right there. If I go over there and hold that door open, his dad may recognize me and reward me in some way. I've got to go hold that door. Now, is that humility? Or is that self-interest? That's self-interest. You'd be surprised how many people will tell you they're your friend when in fact there's an ulterior motive behind it. So I would just say, be truthful and be humble. And I'll tell you this, there's no reason for anybody in this world looking at the cross to walk around with a pride-filled head and a hard heart. Because if you really look at the cross and understand what it represents and what it means, then I realize that I have no right to celebrate anything about myself, because the greatest sacrifice that could have been made was made for me. Today I want to encourage you, if you're not a Christian, to become one. And if you are a Christian and for some reason you struggle, won't you please come while we stand, while we sing.